you ever stopped to think about just how much trust an organization places in its people every single day? With its most valuable assets, its sensitive information.
It's immense, isn't it?
Yeah. And what happens if that trust is maybe unknowingly misplaced?
Well, that's exactly what we're digging into.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into understanding and, more importantly, implementing robust physical controls. The kind designed specifically to deter employee theft and fraud. It's about more than just, locks and keys. It's really about building a foundational shield for your operations.
That's a great way to put it. In our discussion today, it's actually grounded in a pretty comprehensive set of assessment questions. These come from leading experts in fraud examination.
Okay.
Specifically, the kind of detailed template used by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, the ACFE. They're really seen as the global standard setters for tackling occupational fraud.
Right.
And this framework we're drawing on, it was prepared in collaboration with yazan.abogosh, who's a certified fraud examiner, and EasyPathUni. It's designed precisely to, pinpoint those vulnerabilities and really strengthen an organization's defenses.
Okay, good. So let's unpack these critical controls then. Our mission today isn't just to list them off.
No.
We want to get into why they matter so much.
Yeah.
Maybe offer some surprising insights and definitely some practical steps you could actually use to protect your assets, your information, whether it's paper or pixels.
Exactly. Physical and digital.
So get ready for a conversation that's hopefully informative, practical, and maybe a bit eye-opening.
Let's do it.
So when we talk about preventing fraud, I think most people's minds jump straight to things like alarms, maybe cameras, locked doors.
Sure, the obvious stuff.
Yeah, but what often gets missed, I think, is that the most effective prevention actually starts way earlier, like before someone even walks in the door on day one. We're talking about the importance, the absolute necessity, really, of pre-employment background checks.
Yeah.
Why are these such a crucial first line of defense?
Well, it's interesting because the foundational elements here are really deeply human, and they're cultural. Those pre-employment checks are your first filter. They help spot, any history of dishonest or perhaps unethical behavior. But then, once someone is on the team, it's absolutely critical to have documented policies and procedures. And these need to be really clear. They need to spell out what counts as unethical conduct, what the consequences are, and this is key, how someone can actually report violations.
Okay.
Research consistently shows that organizations where policies are clearly communicated and where employees actually acknowledge them see a real drop in internal fraud compared to places where the rules are vague or just, sit unread in a binder somewhere.
Right.
It's that human element of understanding and actually buying in that makes the difference.
And it's not just having the policies collecting dust, is it? We hear this phrase all the time, tone at the top. How important is it really for senior leadership to be visibly, championing these ethics and anti-fraud policies? Does that commitment actually filter down?
Oh, it absolutely does. It's not just jargon. When senior leaders visibly commit, when they talk about it, when they act on it, it sends this incredibly powerful signal through the entire organization. Fraud isn't acceptable here, period.
Okay.
This tone at the top isn't just a slogan. It genuinely shapes the whole culture. It creates an environment where integrity is the expectation and misconduct is discouraged because everyone, knows the score.
So building on that cultural piece, employee education on ethics and anti-fraud programs seems non-negotiable.
Definitely.
It's not enough to just email a PDF, right?
Yeah.
They need training that actually connects. And crucially, getting employees to sign an acknowledgement that they've received it and, importantly, understood it. That signature feels like more than just paperwork.
It absolutely is. It's a critical documented component. The training makes sure people don't just know the rules, but they understand their part in upholding them. It actually empowers them.
Right.
And that leads directly to another vital point, providing an anonymous way to report suspected violations.
Ah, yes. Why is anonymity so crucial for getting people to actually speak up?
Because it tackles the fear factor. Fear of retaliation, fear of being labeled a troublemaker. Anonymity removes that barrier. Employees are far, far more likely to raise a concern if they know their identity is protected.
Makes sense.
It builds trust in the reporting system itself, and it means valuable information stuff that might otherwise stay hidden actually sees the light of day.
Okay, so if we tie these first few points together, you can really see how they're not just compliance checkboxes.
Not at all.
These initial steps, the background checks, the clear policies, the leadership buy-in, the training, the anonymous reporting channel, They really form the cultural bedrock of a secure organization. They actively shape behavior, they set expectations, and they proactively deter bad stuff by building this environment of integrity right from the get-go.
Precisely. It's preventative at its core.
All right, so we've laid that essential groundwork. The human element, the cultural bedrock, very important.
Foundational.
But once that's solid, how do we actually secure the place itself, physically and digitally? Let's talk about, fortifying the castle. A really critical step's got to be restricting access to areas with sensitive documents, financial records, maybe proprietary designs, client files. What kind of system do you need to track who's getting into those areas to provide a solid audit trail of access? And what's the real fallout if you don't have that trail?
Well, what's really crucial here is understanding the dual nature of access control. For physical documents, yeah, you need physical barriers, locked cabinets, secure rooms, that kind of thing.
Right.
But maybe even more important is a system that logs who accessed what and when. This could be through, say, secure badge access systems that timestamp entries, or maybe just really robust sign-in, sign-out sheets for specific sensitive files.
Right.
Without that audit trail, if a crucial document vanishes, you've got no starting point. You can't trace it back. It turns a potential theft or leak into, well, an unsolvable mystery. Big problem.
And thinking digitally, it's obviously not just about paper anymore. We need that same level of vigilance, that same kind of audit trail for our digital assets too, don't we? The source material really stresses restricting access to computer systems holding sensitive stuff. Accounting software, inventory databases, payroll systems.
Oh, absolutely. The principles are identical, and you could argue they're even more critical given the sheer volume of digital data we handle now.
Yeah.
Access to computer systems with sensitive info should be restricted strictly to those who absolutely need it for their job. It's the principle of least privilege.
Right, only what you need.
Exactly. And an audit trail of digital access logging, user IDs, timestamps, what actions were taken within those systems, that's paramount. It's essential for accountability and for any investigation later. It lets you piece together what happened if there's a breach or some kind of anomaly.
Okay, moving from documents to actual physical assets. Things people might want to, walk away with. We also need to talk about restricting access to areas with high-value assets. Places like shipping and receiving, storerooms, definitely cash handling areas.
Prime targets.
Yeah. And maintaining a log of who goes in and out of these places seems like common sense. But what are some of the practical hurdles organizations run into trying to enforce this consistently?
You're spot on. It often gets overlooked in the day-to-day rush. High-value assets are obvious targets, right? So limiting physical access combined with the detailed log of who's entering and leaving these sensitive spots gives you that clear chain of custody and accountability. The challenge: often it's just maintaining diligence, especially in busy areas like shipping. It needs constant supervision, clear signage, and making sure staff understand the why behind it, not just that it's another rule. It's really about making it significantly harder for someone to just, pocket something valuable unnoticed.
Okay. Now let's switch gears slightly to the digital gatekeepers, passwords. The source material goes into quite a bit of detail here. It's not just having them, but things like mandating that passwords be changed periodically.
Yes.
And making sure they use a combination of letters, numbers, and symbols. Plus, having strict policies against sharing passwords and prohibiting using the same password multiple times. It sounds like a solid strategy, but where's the usual weak link in all this?
It is a comprehensive approach, and good password hygiene is just fundamental digital security. Changing them periodically limits the window if one gets compromised.
Right.
The complexity rules make them way harder to guess or brute force crack. But the weakest link, it's almost always us, the people.
Human error.
Exactly. Policies against sharing or reusing passwords are all about individual accountability. But how often do you still see passwords on sticky notes? Or shared, just quickly, between colleagues? One compromised account can blow a huge hole in your security. And that rule about not reusing passwords, super important. It means if, say, your password for some unrelated online service gets breached, the attackers can't then use that same password to get into your critical work systems. It contains the damage.
Now, this is a really critical point, I think. What happens when employees leave? The source mentions needing a written policy that restricts system access, including prompt termination of their user access. That seems like it should be priority number one the moment someone resigns or is let go.
It absolutely is. And it's an area where frankly, organizations sometimes drop the ball. When someone leaves, for whatever reason, their access to all systems needs to be cut off immediately and thoroughly.
Yeah.
No delays. Any lag time creates a massive vulnerability. Think about a disgruntled former employee. They could cause immense damage. And the source also points out something related. The need for non-employees, like contractors or vendors who might need system access, to sign a confidentiality agreement.
Okay, yeah.
This isn't just legal boilerplate. It extends that circle of accountability. It makes it crystal clear what sensitive information they might see and what the consequences are if they misuse it.
So thinking about all these access controls we've just discussed, physical, digital, passwords, levers, what does this mean for you, our listener? Maybe take a moment and think. How might an impartial observer rate your organization's access controls? Do things look buttoned up and secure from the outside, or are there maybe some obvious gaps? Good mental check.
That's a great exercise.
Okay, let's move into the next phase.
Yeah.
Active monitoring and ongoing reinforcement. It's about maintaining constant vigilance.
Staying alert.
The source highlights using CCTV and recording equipment, monitoring entries, exits, those sensitive high-value areas we talked about, even sales areas. This isn't just about catching someone red-handed, is it? There's a deterrent effect, too.
Precisely. The mere presence of cameras can be a powerful psychological deterrent. It makes people think twice.
Yeah.
But beyond just deterring bad behavior, the recordings obviously provide critical evidence if an incident does happen. They're invaluable for investigations, for recovery efforts, so it works both ways, prevention and detection. It adds that layer of visual accountability.
Okay, and here's something I find really interesting. Random, unannounced audits of inventory, cash, expenses, purchasing, billing, basically anywhere money or assets move. Why are those two words, random and unannounced, the sort of secret sauce that makes these audits so much more effective than just, say, scheduled quarterly reviews?
Random and unannounced are the secret sauce. Think about it. If audits are predictable, if people know they're coming on the 15th of the month,
They can clean things up.
Exactly. Perpetrators have time to alter records, destroy evidence, cook the books, whatever. The element of surprise is absolutely vital. It means employees never know when their area might be under scrutiny.
Yeah, keeps them honest.
It significantly reduces both the opportunity and, frankly, the incentive for fraud. It forces people to follow policies all the time, not just scramble to look compliant before a scheduled audit.
And sometimes you might need more specialized eyes on things. The source mentions the role of professional loss prevention or security personnel in actually monitoring these physical controls. What unique value do these pros bring compared to, say, a regular manager just keeping an eye out?
Well, these professionals bring a focused, expert perspective. They're trained specifically to spot subtle vulnerabilities, to recognize patterns that might indicate suspicious activity, things a manager busy with operations might easily miss.
Okay.
They're also often up to date on the latest methods thieves or fraudsters are using, so they can provide a more proactive layer of security. They anticipate risks.
And when something does seem off, the response needs to be quick, right? The source really underscores the importance of promptly investigating incidents of suspected or reported fraud to minimize the damage. Time really is money in these situations.
It couldn't be more true. Every moment you delay investigating a credible suspicion can mean more money walking out the door, more evidence being destroyed, or the perpetrator having more time to cover their tracks.
Right.
A rapid, thorough, and importantly, confidential investigation is critical. It helps contain the damage, helps recover assets if possible, and it also sends a very clear message throughout the organization. This stuff gets taken seriously.
Let's unpack a real cornerstone of internal control. Segregation of duties. This is especially critical in areas where there are clear opportunities for fraud.
Yeah.
What does this actually look like day to day? Like, you wouldn't have the same person approving invoices, cutting the checks, and reconciling the bank account, right?
Exactly right. That's the classic example. Segregation of duties is all about making sure no single person has end-to-end control over a transaction or process, especially a financial one. If one person can authorize a payment, issue it, and verify it cleared the bank correctly, well, that's a huge, tempting opportunity for fraud. By separating those tasks, having different people authorize, record, and reconcile, you build in checks and balances.
Makes it harder to cheat.
Much harder. Fraud would require collusion between multiple people, which significantly raises the difficulty and the risk for the perpetrators. Now, the challenge, especially in smaller organizations, is often limited staff. One person might genuinely have to wear multiple hats.
Yeah, what do you do then?
In those cases, you need what are called compensating controls. Things like much closer oversight by management or maybe more frequent independent reviews of transactions by an owner or an external accountant. You have to find other ways to introduce that check and balance.
Okay, so if we zoom out again, it's clear this isn't just about a list of technical rules or procedures. The source really emphasizes this overarching theme. There needs to be an ethical component woven into all policies, communications, and decision-making. Ethics isn't just a separate HR policy. It has to be part of the fabric. How does that pervasive ethical focus actually reinforce all the specific controls we've been talking about?
That's such a critical point. Ethics can't be an afterthought or just a module in the annual training. It has to be ingrained. When ethical considerations genuinely guide every policy, every internal memo, every management decision, it fosters a culture where integrity isn't just talked about, it's expected and valued. And that reinforces all the other controls because employees understand the why behind them. They see the controls aren't just bureaucratic hurdles. They're there to uphold the organization's values and protect everyone. It makes fraudulent behavior feel not just against the rules, but fundamentally against the company's ethos.
Finally, let's touch on controlling company assets outside normal business hours. The source brings up having policies about access to the organization's equipment and things like company cars after hours. Why are these seemingly smaller details important to nail down? What temptations might they address?
These details, while maybe seeming small, are important because they cover periods when direct supervision is likely much lower. Having a documented approval process for taking equipment off-site or accessing facilities after hours ensures accountability. It prevents unauthorized borrowing that can easily lead to loss or damage.
Right.
And for company cars, managing their use after hours helps clarify personal versus business use. Unauthorized personal use, while maybe seeming minor to some, is still technically a form of asset misuse or even theft of resources. It's really about extending that umbrella of control and accountability beyond the 9-to-5, closing potential loopholes.
And right on that note, thinking about information security right up to the end of the day, the source concludes with a really basic but crucial policy that management needs to enforce. Requiring employees to log off their computers after business hours or whenever they leave their computers unattended. Simple habit. Huge impact.
It truly is. An unattended computer that's still logged in is basically an open invitation. Anyone walking by could potentially access sensitive information, or worse, it could be an entry point if the network itself gets compromised somehow.
Yeah.
This policy is a fundamental yet incredibly effective safeguard against unauthorized access to digital assets. It reinforces that principle of restricted access even when someone is physically nearby but just stepped away for a coffee. It's the digital equivalent of locking your office door when you leave, even for a minute.
So, putting this all together, what's the big takeaway? Deterring employee theft and fraud clearly isn't about finding one magic bullet solution.
Not at all.
It's a multifaceted approach. It demands that combination of, first, strong ethical foundations built right into the company culture. Then, meticulously implemented physical and digital controls.
Right.
And then, crucially, that layer of consistent monitoring and ongoing vigilance.
And what's really crucial for listeners to grasp is that these controls aren't static. You can't just set them up once and forget about them.
Good point.
They need continuous review, continuous adaptation. Technology changes, risks evolve, business processes change. So the controls have to keep pace. The ultimate goal isn't necessarily to eliminate fraud entirely. That might be impossible, but to create an environment where the probability of a significant fraudulent event is drastically reduced.
Right.
That's how you safeguard the organization's assets and, maybe even more importantly, its integrity and its hard-earned reputation.
Which leads to a final thought, maybe something provocative for you to consider. What might be the hidden costs, the ones beyond just the direct financial loss of not having these robust controls in place?
Yeah.
Think about things like the erosion of internal trust, the damage to your brand reputation if something gets out, or even just the breakdown in team morale.
Huge potential impacts.
And then flip that coin. What surprising opportunities might actually open up when an organization successfully fosters an environment of such high trust and pervasive security? We really encourage you to think about your own situation, your own context, and how these principles might be applied to build a more resilient, more trustworthy environment right where you are.